Chapter 12, Part 2. So, Chapter 12, Food Safety Concerns. The first part of Chapter 12, we focused on what are the pathogens, what are the different types of foodborne illnesses, what are some high-risk foods, and talked about some of the more common signs and symptoms of foodborne illnesses. For Part 2, we're going to focus on how to purchase foods, store foods, how to prevent the foodborne illnesses by food handling techniques, food preservation, and so forth. And we may get to the point where we talk a little bit about food additives and traveling with food. So let's break it down. How can we prevent foodborne illnesses when we're purchasing food? Okay, so to begin with, you want to select foods that are not broken or damaged in any way. So you want to make sure you're buying foods that are whole, okay, and not buying like cracked eggs, broken, opened packages. Your highly perishable foods like your meats, your poultry, your fish, your dairy products, you want to shop for those last and pretty much keep your cold foods cold, right? Make sure you're separating your raw, uncooked meats from your fresh, edible foods and veggies by keeping them separate. And it goes without saying, take your groceries home immediately. Don't leave them in a hot car, okay, for 45 minutes, run to Target type thing. Take them home immediately, refrigerate them immediately, store your eggs in, preferably the carton that they come in. If you have eggs that you've purchased from a local farmer or you have your backyard chickens, make sure you are understanding if they're washed or unwashed. Unwashed eggs have a bloom, a natural protective membrane on them that's going to protect them from drying out and from bacteria, that kind of thing. And they can last at room temperature for several weeks, about 2 weeks if it's an unwashed fresh egg. But most of us don't have backyard chickens, and we get our eggs from the grocery store, which have been washed. And so it's best to leave them in their original container to help prevent from drying out and odors from your refrigerator getting into the eggs. And as always, you can personally take these steps to prevent foodborne illness when you're preparing your food. It goes without saying, but we will say it over and over again, is to wash your hands thoroughly. Okay, we've talked about hand washing as that first universal precaution to kind of break that chain of infection. Making sure your surfaces are cleaned, making sure every now and then you sanitize your work area, using separate cutting boards for your raw veggies and your raw meats, two separate cutting boards. Make sure those cutting boards are free from damage and hot marks or streak cuts. Okay, plastic cutting boards, wood cutting boards, after a lot of use can become marred and streaked, and you definitely want to replace those. So replace often. Also, when it comes to things like dish rags, sanitizing kitchen towels and sponges, please make sure you are replacing kitchen sponges frequently, either by throwing them in the dishwasher or heating them in the microwave, and or replacing them frequently. Okay, and making sure you're always using fresh, clean towels. Little things like that do add up, and teaching your family members good habits also helps. Also, when you're preparing food, you want to make sure you're washing fresh produce under running water. Don't eat anything that you have a doubt about. Okay. Avoid moldy foods. Don't taste it to find out type thing. When in doubt, throw it out. But you can save certain cheeses. Okay. So small amounts of mold on hard cheeses and firm fruits and vegetables can be removed, but you don't want to eat soft cheeses like your cottage cheese and your cream cheeses and those kind of things, if they have mold on them, because that mold has probably spread. Okay, same thing with breads. Be very careful. Yes, you might be able to cut out some of the mold on the bread, but just be very careful. Let's move now to what's called the danger zone. This is the temperature from 40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. This is where bacteria love to thrive. So it's why we call the danger zone. And you also notice that when we go to cook foods, the safe minimum internal temperature for cooking foods are going to be above this 140 mark. Okay, so beef and roasts about 145, fish 145, pork 140. These are all minimums. Okay, ground beef and veal 160. So poultry products 165, egg dishes 160. So when you're cooking your foods, you want to make sure you get above a minimum of 145 degrees, um, preferably around 160. Okay, any higher than that, you run the damage of blackening foods or drying out foods. So you reduce the not so much the nutritional quality, but the flavorability of the food. But proper food cooking temperature is of utmost importance. And also making sure you check your refrigerator at home, making sure your refrigerator is definitely below 40 degrees. Okay. Because if it's 40 and above, then that is in that danger zone. So make sure your refrigerator is at least 39 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. When we look at preparing foods, the best thing to have in your kitchen, besides soap and water to wash your hands, is going to be a decent meat thermometer. Okay. Using a meat thermometer is a reliable way to ensure that you've reached that critical internal food temperature, that minimum safe temperature we just talked about. So whether it's a old standby dial thermometer here or a digital fancy meat thermometer, whatever you want to use, make sure it's calibrated, and you can kind of calibrate your own, put it in boiling water and, uh, you know, temperature water boils, make sure it's reading that. Um, also, um, making sure when you place the probe of the thermometer in your meat that you're not hitting bone or gristle or fat, because that will definitely obscure that temperature that you're reading. It's getting to be hot and summertime out there, and we're going to be going to cookouts and barbecues and church functions and school picnics and all those kind of things where people are bringing food. It is very important that you keep hot foods hot and cold foods cold. So if you are the one bringing the potato salad, the mayonnaise based dish, or the mayonnaise based deviled eggs, or whatever it may be, um, um, these highly perishable foods, make sure you also bring the cooling container to set it in, especially if you know it's going to be stored outside in the sun. Try to avoid that if at all possible. But keeping chilled foods covered in a bowl of ice, or keeping hot foods covered in a shallow pan of heated water, or within a little crock pot, or on a warm food grade food pad warmer. You see all kinds of um, things out there now to keep hot foods hot. You can't really beat a good crock pot. So if your food will sit into a crock pot and you have electricity to keep that plugged in and keep it on warm, that is going to be the best bet. When we look at individual foods, remember with raw fish, we spoke about this last week when we talked about the foodborne illnesses. Make sure you're getting it from a safe source and that it's stored properly. With your ground meats, fish, and poultry, make sure you are assuming every ground product is contaminated, because it is. The grinding process mixes pathogens both in the air and in the meat grinder apparatus that you see here, and it's folding the pathogens in instead of being strictly on top of the food like you would have in a steak or a fish fillet. So making sure you're cooking those to the proper temperature. Okay. When you are cooking eggs, make sure the yolk is not completely runny. Okay, but it can have the yolk be somewhat congealed to make sure it's reached that proper temperature. When you're storing foods, like we said before, we talked about making sure foods are kept outside of that danger zone as much as possible. Pathogens love room temperature, which is 60 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So we want to keep food out of that uh, room temperature range. Okay, any food that needs to be left out for more than 2 hours, please make sure it's either on ice or on heat. All right. If it's a real hot summer day, then less than 1 hour. It's your responsibility to make sure your food is preserved safely and be on the lookout for others. When you're looking at storing foods in the refrigerator, make sure leftovers are covered and that the food can be stored, preferably not on the doors of refrigerators, as you see here, because that's known as the danger zone of the refrigerator. And that's where the food is going to be the warmest. And it's a fun test to do kind of on your own. Put a thermometer in the very back of your refrigerator and then put a different thermometer here on the door, and you'll see the differences in range there just within your own refrigerator. So when in doubt, clean it, separate it, cook it, and chill it. These 4 steps here are going to ensure prevention of foodborne illness, or at least greatly reduce your risk of foodborne illness. So cleaning your hands, cleaning your surfaces. Sorry about that. Separating your foods, keeping the raw separate from the fresh, cooking to the proper internal temperature, and chilling and refrigerating promptly. We will do one more short video to end our chapter and talk about food preservation and how you can prevent getting sick when traveling.